Hey there, Mr. Reddit here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. I told my in-laws exactly where my husband was at when I was in labor. After that, you only want me working part-time in case there isn't too much work next year? Sure. And after that, my sister is my hero. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets bit by a mosquito. Oh, you're so wrong for that. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notification for new stories from Reddit every single day. I told my in-laws exactly where my husband was at when I was in labor. I gave birth to my son 10 weeks ago. I went through exhausting periods while I was nearing my due date. I was experiencing discomfort and wanted my husband by my side when I go into labor, but he'd go out every night to hang out at his friend's place and watch football games. I suggested that he play/watch football games at home just in case, but he was having none of it and said he had to attend game night at his brother and friend's place along with his buddies. He said they had certain, how can I describe it, rituals when watching a game, and he can't enjoy doing it at home or anywhere else. The night of our son's birth, my water broke while my husband was at his buddy's place watching a game. I called him and told him to get home and take me to the hospital. He said he was coming, but he didn't. I ended up calling my sister. She lives nearby, and she took me to the hospital. My husband showed up 2 hours later after he kept calling, asking if I was still in labor and that he was almost done watching the game. He was able to make it on time for our son's birth, but I was furious with him, mad and disappointed. He apologized profoundly and has been working on regaining my trust and respect for him after what he's done. He's otherwise very supportive and involved in our son's care. Last night, I was at my in-laws' house for dinner, and we were talking about my son's birth date. My husband suddenly started recalling what happened that night and basically started lying about driving me to the hospital, waiting and feeling stressed out, and standing on his feet for so long without food or even water. I was confused, and I said, "No, none of this is true. None of this happened. In fact, he was watching a football game when I went into labor, and I wanted him to drive me to the hospital, but he didn't show up until 2 hours later." My mother-in-law, who takes no crap from anybody and whom everybody fears, lost it on him, yelling, asking him if that was true, and he kept quiet. She started losing it on him left and right, telling him to sit down and shut up when he stood up to argue, then told him to stand up when he was sitting arguing. Everyone was laughing at how she basically treated him as if he was a boy in trouble. She kept saying, "Shame, shame, shame on you. This is not how I raised my kids to treat their wives. Jordan, you are a disgrace, and I'm disappointed because of what I heard about you." He just took every bit of it and didn't say anything until we got home, when he went nuts, saying I made him look neglectful, a bad husband and father by telling the family about where he was, and said I shouldn't have said anything. But I argued it wasn't okay for him to lie and play hero in front of his parents. He said I just caused a rift between him and his family and asked if I was happy now. Am I the jerk? Should I not have said anything? Edit to say that he's done similar things in the past since he's a major enthusiast of football and hockey, but I didn't expect it to come to that. Also, this is not our first baby together. We have a 4-year-old son. I feel sick to my stomach right now. What kind of father would rather watch a football game than be at the hospital when his son is about to be born? It's okay, Karen. Here, let's read our next story. I need a smoothie. You only want me working part-time in case there isn't too much work next year? Sure. I must confess, I have profound respect for people who do not take crap from their employers. You are my heroes, and so I hope my story can help someone else. Okay, so first some necessary background info. I live in a small country, and I'm an engineer in a very niche field. Where I live, there are about 15 to 18 people in my field in the whole country. Also, unions are a good thing here, and most companies are fine with unions. The employee benefits from this, but so does the employer, since the rules of the game are very clear. Clear for most people, as my employer was about to find out. My story goes like this, and it took place late 2019 until late 2020. My team consisted of 3 people, me included, and one on our team, our mentor, was ready to retire 2 years prior to this happening, but he stayed on because, codependence issues, I guess. We had 10 to 12 years experience each. We were just younger and more inexperienced than our mentor, who has 40+ years experience. I really envisioned us taking over the team soonish. Company is a large actor where I live, but things had not been going too great. For the shareholders, for some 6 months prior to all of this happening. Knowing this, I decide I'll not ask for a raise in my annual performance review to show I'm a team player and explicitly state this is to my boss's boss, Mr. V, is all fine and well. For 3 months. Then the bomb drops. One fine autumn day in 2019, I was called to a meeting with my boss, Mrs. G. Mrs. G told me that they didn't expect there to be enough work to go around for my team next year. Lockdown had not struck yet, so that was not the reason. So they wanted to cut me down to a part-time job, working only 80%. That would be about 4 days a week, starting 3 months hence. I immediately asked if this is also the case for my other coworker and if our mentor was going to retire. Well, yes, but no. My coworker would also be offered 80%. Our mentor was going to be working 60%. And I'm like, what? He really wants to retire, you know? Well, he is not yet, says Mrs. G, because of reasons and stuff. Okay, so I signed the new contract, but feel bad about it since I was really trying to be a team player and did not feel my employer was taking responsibility for us employees, but only thinking of the shareholders. I also get the feeling that they do not see me or my coworker taking over the team anytime soon, despite us not being novices in the field. I immediately start planning for the future. After this happens, I start asking around if other employees are also facing part-time employment due to no projects in 2020. As one does, you want to know if others are doing right. Nobody else is getting part-timed, and everybody else is appalled. Just us three. We are singled out for some reason. Some of our colleagues even say that they've had stints of no work for months without any action taken in this regard. There is now general displeasure in my team towards our employer. Since our mentor just wanted to retire and let us do the job, there would not have been any reason to have us younger engineers working part-time, really. But no, because of reasons and stuff. Okay, so what to do? I have a family and 2 kids, mortgages and a lot, and this will be a blow to the family income. So I start planning to do some work on the side. Since I am an engineer, I can do consulting, right? My employment contract says no. But if my employer cannot or will not offer me a full-time job, the union contract says I can do what I want with the rest of my time, and my employer cannot interfere. I also have the right to refuse more work from my employer because I may have other obligations. Me 1, employer 0. I open up my own company, buy a domain, make a web page, start calling, writing, and letting people know I am available for consulting. Of course, I checked with the union lawyers beforehand if this was okay, which it was, totally fine. They told me that since my employer laid me off and rehired me part-time, I could do what I wanted the rest of my time. This would not have been the case if I had requested part-time employment. Great. I go to work for myself then. Me 2, employer 0. Almost immediately after our new contracts take effect, my employer starts noticing there's more than enough work to go around and asks me to work more hours. No, I say. Unfortunately, I have other obligations. I really didn't. I was just making a stand and enforcing them to recognize their own mistake. Time passes. My savings account drains in about 3 months' time, but we managed to cut down on our expenses, so it's not rough seas, but still not smooth sailing by far. Income is a bit on the low side, although I managed to get some consulting done in my own time. I switch from sourdough bread to stale, boring white bread. Go from good beer to Bud Light to no beer. What you have to do, you have to do. No more fine roasted coffee from the small shop on the corner. Only what sludge I can get at the supermarket and brew at home. Ugh. But this is temporary, I tell myself. And then it happens. I get a big job and start moonlighting to get it done, working evenings and weekends. And this is when crap hit the fan because word got out. I got an angry phone call from Mrs. G's boss, Mr. V, and we have a heated conversation over what I can and cannot do. The conversation was something like this, in short terms. Mr. V: think of how this reflects on our company. Me: that is not my concern here, Mr. V. I have bills to pay and mouths to feed. Mr. V: this is not what we have had in mind. Me: hey, you laid me off, man. You should know the rules of the game. You cannot dictate what I do in my spare time. Perhaps you should have thought it through when you reduced my hours. You think I was happy to lose income and would not try to remedy my financial situation? You can work more hours for us then. I have other obligations now. Can't let down my customers. Mr. V, very angry now. You should consider your next steps carefully, young man. Me: Mr. V, I shall do that. Thanks for your call. You pompous jerk, I silently added. What then followed was phone call from me to my union explaining the situation. Later that week, my employer got a phone call from the union lawyers who spoke to Mr. V in the HR department, telling them what they can and cannot do. And I just kept working for myself. Mr. V is now very unhappy. Stops greeting me when we pass each other in the hallway. Me 3, employer 0. 2 months later, I hand in my resignation. 3 months after that, I'm gone. And to rub salt in the wounds, as they say here, is that a general expression? I don't know. Please do tell me if there's another expression in English for something to increase an already painful experience. Something remarkable happens. My coworker, not our mentor mind you, asks if I would want to partner up and start a new company together. Yes, I say, for it was a great idea. Coworker hands in resignation a month after I handed mine in, and we start working on our own company full-time. People that depend on our services are very happy about us entering the market as independent consultants. Business takes off. Me/us 4. Employer 0. The aftermath. My former employer has had an opening for our job since August of 2020. Our mentor told me last month he has finally put down his foot and is retiring at the end of the year as he's turning 70 soon. They will thus have gone from 3 people in a very niche field to 0 in less than 2 years because of bad managerial decisions. It did not come as a surprise to me that there were no other available in the market. Since it is a niche field, I know almost every person personally, so I could have told them that everybody seemed happy with their current employer. Being a manager must suck. Oh wait, that's me now. BR from the manager. My sister is my hero. I was with my sister at a large store several years ago. I was thinking it was Walmart, but it may have been Target. First off, my sister is a sweetheart. One of the most loving people you'll ever meet. She loves everyone. If you're a good person and do good things, she will appreciate you. She doesn't yell or raise her voice ever. However, she also doesn't like or appreciate people mistreating others or injustices. She always speaks out. We were in line, and it was a very busy night, and we were several people back. In true sister fashion, she remembered things after we were in line and sent me to go get them. I ran to go get them, and upon my return, I heard the tail end of a heated discussion, which led to everyone clapping and my sister standing at the front of the line angrily glaring at this one guy 3 people back. If I remember correctly, we were 5 people back, so 2 people behind him. Apparently, while I was gone, the cashier had to price check something and was taking a bit longer. The cashier was a very sweet young man who was disabled. I don't think it was the cashier's fault things were slow. It was a busy spurt, meaning the store wasn't that busy, but quite a few people hit the registers all at the same time. And according to my sister, it was a series of events that caused things to slow down on our register. Anyway, the man 3 customers back was super upset that things were taking slow and decided his time was more important than being a decent human being. He angrily muttered things under his breath that my sister refused to repeat. Then after the second price check, he started yelling, "Come on, you've got to be kidding me. Can we get a real employee to check us out? Get this guy out of here." According to the woman in front of him, that was when my sister had enough. She left our cart in line and marched over to the employee and stood next to him behind the conveyor belt. She looked at the employee and told him, "You're perfect, and don't let mean people try to tell you otherwise." Then she glared at the man, raising her voice to be heard since he was still yelling, and now at her. "He doesn't need any other reason to be slow." I assume he was cursing too, but my sister doesn't curse, and when I was told what I missed, it was by my sister and the older woman. We were in our 20s. I assume the woman was mid-40s that was in front of that mean dude. Anyway, she stared daggers at him and bluntly told him, "How dare you talk to someone like that? No one deserves to be talked to like that. Also, I abhor that word you used, but the only one acting like that is you." The man said something about how my sister can't talk to him like that. He's a customer. To which my sister told him, "I don't work here." She said slowly and emphasized each word. "And I don't know him. What I do know is you have a poor attitude and you should think about how you talk to people, as you don't want to be that guy." She air quoted that for emphasis. I could hear the "I don't work here" as I came back and ended up running past everyone, seeing my sister still standing by the employee with her hand on his back. I ran past everyone and stood at the end of the conveyor belt. Mostly, I wanted to be in between the man and my sister. Everyone started clapping by this point, and we're all staring at him. Some guy that was behind us was cheering on my sister and calling out things like, "Dude, don't be a jerk, just shut up." No one moved or said anything else, so my sister continued. "Well, as I see it, you have two choices. You can leave and go somewhere else, or shut your mouth." At this point, a manager came up and stood next to me, looking around all the entire line at everyone, dead quiet, waiting to see what the man wanted to do. "Is everything okay here?" he asked slowly. My sister answered, "This man here was mistreating your employee." The manager looked upset, but the guy was already properly shamed for his attitude, looking down, not saying anything. My sister looked at the employee, asking him if he was okay or if he needed a break. The manager was a little slow, but backed up the break, even offered to take over his lane. The employee said he wanted one, but wanted to clear his lane first. My sister refused to leave his side. I refused to move. I wanted to stay between angry guy and my sister. The manager stood next to me and took over bagging, though he told the rest of the people in the line that the other register was now open. A few people went. The guy went through the line quickly, paid and left, and refused to look at anyone in the eyes. After he went through, my sister waved the guy that was behind us through so we would be last. After we finished paying, the employee came around and gave her the biggest hug and thanked her. He had tears in his eyes. He said that it happened often, and this was the first time anybody had ever stood up for him. He also explained this was why he rarely helps on register unless it's late at night. My sister told him to always remember, if people are mean, it wasn't his fault or his problem. It's their problem. After that, he left to go on break while the older woman stayed to talk to us and offered to buy our items. My sister refused the offer, but happily talked to her while they filled me in. The manager came out a few minutes later and gave us coupons and a gift card. She took the coupons, but asked if he would give the gift card to the employee. Honestly, I'm surprised Angry Man stayed and checked out. I hope he thinks about how he talks to people in the future. Older cousin demanded her inheritance after our grandmother passed. She screams like a banshee when I tell her no. For context, my maternal grandmother is the one who passed, and my sister and I always called her by the Portuguese word for grandmother, vô. My biological mother is Vo's second and youngest kid, with there being a 12-year gap between my aunt and my mother. As a result, my cousins from that aunt are way older than me, as in I spent a decent part of being a toddler as the flower girl at their weddings. The cousin in this story is my cousin H, who's 15 years older than me. Given the gap in age, my Vo was super involved with my sister and I, as well as her great-grandkids from the older cousins. I was very close to Vo and still say, even now, that she was my very first best friend in this world. As she aged, Vo's health got worse, and by the time I was in high school, she was on oxygen around the clock. When we were kids, she had paperwork drawn up like a will, healthcare proxies, and others, just in case something happened, but we couldn't sign as we were under 18 back then. With the exception of maybe 3 people, most of my mother's family are huge addicts who refuse to get help. Vo didn't trust anyone other than my sister, my cousin Steve, and me. As soon as we were old enough, Vo asked us to take her to have these documents updated. Vo named my sister and I in the updated documents, and I had a professor at school review the new documents with me as well, so I understood them thoroughly. Steve was newly married, expecting his first kid, and renovating his new home, so Vo didn't want to stress him out more. Whenever a decision needed to be made on Vo's behalf, my sister and I would include him, and as someone older than us, we looked up to him. His sister, H, was a full-fledged addict on top of being entitled and snobby. Her husband, now ex, owns his own masonry business, and they did well for themselves, but when I was in junior high, she somehow managed to steal $10K out of Vo's savings and open a credit card in Vo's name. I was upset. My Vo was devastated that H did this to her. Fast forward a bit, and during my early 20s, I get news that my Vo has a bad case of pneumonia and is hospitalized. During my school winter vacation, I spend every day with her, and the doc says to me that she'll be discharged the next day since she's better. I return to school at the end of break, and I get a call 2 days later from my sister. The long and short of it is that Vo took a bad turn after discharge, and it didn't look like she'll survive. I raced back home. What was a 2-hour drive took maybe 90 minutes. I make it in time to say goodbye. I came in and held her hand and gave her one last kiss on the cheek. She passed about 10 minutes later. As everyone was in the elevator leaving, H asks Steve, sister, and I why we were the only 3 people the care team would speak to privately. We shrug it off in no mood to fuss. Sister and I get to work arranging the details of the funeral/wake. Vo's church has a beautiful memorial for her, and after we get back to my sister's house, H starts her crap again. She had been snooping and learned that sister and I were named as the proxy in POA, with me as the primary. I confirmed this to H, and she also read something about the will and that I was the executor. She starts her entitled Karen act when I confirm the will is correct. H: Why you of all people? You're just a kid. Me: I'm 22, not 5. She picked me because she doesn't trust most of the family. H: Whatever. Just give me what Vo left and I'll go. And I'll take whatever she left for my kids too. H has 2 kids named Courtney and Cody. My sister, Courtney, and I were left a necklace and a ring each and a little money. Cody got roughly 9 to 10K as he didn't get much in the way of items passed down. Vo didn't think he would want women's jewelry. However, she also gave me her old engagement ring to hold until one of you kids gets engaged and wants it. J: What are you on about? H: Give me my money and my kids' stuff. J: I can't. Why? Well, if you'd read the whole will, you'd know that you didn't get anything. Why? Because Vo said you already got yours when you stole her identity and retirement savings. Whatever. Give me the stuff for my kids then. I can't. Vo had me promise not to give anything to anyone other than the people listed. I can't give you my sister's inheritance for you to give to her. It goes directly to her. Guys, H is near 40 and throws a tantrum in the driveway and calls the cops on me. Tried saying I stole everything and attacked her. It backfired on her. Cops ran all of our info and H had warrants in 3 states. I just can't. She also wanted me to pay her bail. I told her forget herself. Edit. This all took place a few years ago, and I ran into my old teacher who knew the situation as she was friends with Vo since they were young. I was reminded of the situation when Vo's friend and I had coffee together after running into each other. You want me to lie about my hours so I don't go into overtime? Okay. I work in theater, doing front of house/customer service work, so that means I typically do a lot of odd hours with evenings and weekends. At my former job, they only wanted to pay me hourly, despite asking for salary numerous times, and honestly, it would have benefited them more than me. On average, my weekdays would run from 2 to 10, as I had my managerial/admin work I had to do during the day, which I couldn't always do during shows and events. I tried to schedule things so I wouldn't go into overtime, but every once in a while, it happened. Shows run long, people like to stay and chat. Rental events don't know their timings well and really mess up the time. It happens, just part of the job. So it would be pretty common for me to finish with 8.5 or 9-hour days. And since I was paid hourly, that meant overtime. Eventually, my boss and the executive director talked to me about why I so often went into overtime and why did I come in early when I knew I'd be staying late. I outlined that unless I couldn't, I would schedule my days to try and have some leeway to avoid daily overtime, but it wasn't always possible and they should understand that, especially my boss, as she had my position at one point before I started. While they did acknowledge that point, they didn't want to constantly pay for a little bit of overtime. Their solution was for me to adjust the hours on my timesheet on a day I worked over 8 hours and just take what would have been overtime and put it on a different day. In other words, misuse labor laws, so they wouldn't have to pay me an extra $9 or so for the half hour of daily overtime. I was unimpressed, but I was already looking for a new job, so I decided to play ball, because I knew I could still make my point with some malicious compliance. Thankfully, that first week, there were events I knew would likely run long, and they didn't disappoint. I ended up having to spread 6.5 hours of work over 2 days, one of which I came in after 5, but I ended up putting on my schedule that I came in at 2. Still, the same hours worked, just spread out to avoid the daily overtime. Well, of course, when timesheets were checked over, this was noticed that there were 2 days I charged for being in the office when I wasn't by our accountant. When she asked what the situation was, I explained that I did what was requested. I took the daily overtime hours and moved them to days I wasn't going into overtime. Thankfully, the accountant and I were pretty close, so she just rolled her eyes at the stupidity of it all and went to talk to my boss and the ED about it. The cherry on top of it all? Because I still claimed the same amount of hours, I still went into weekly overtime, which ended up meaning I got more money, because the weekly hours all came in one lump, rather than being spread out over the daily hours. 4 hours at 1.5 hours and 2.5 at double hours, rather than the 6.5 all at the time and a half. Oddly enough, for the last couple months I worked at that mess of a theater, they didn't really harp on me about daily overtime anymore. Am I the jerk for telling my wife that she is the mediocre one? My wife and I are both highly educated people. We both have doctorates and several master's degrees, as well as being successful in our professional lives. We also have a son, Caleb, who's 18, male. He's our pride and joy. Throughout Caleb's life, my wife and I have had some disagreements about parenting. I'm someone who values my son being a well-rounded person, which means I don't want Caleb just to have good grades, and I don't care if he doesn't get a perfect score. And my wife is someone who values grades and discipline. It has taken us a long time to find a balance between what me and my wife want. Caleb in his first semester of law school. One of the requirements to graduate is to certify that you know the English language. Since Caleb already has a certification, he decided to pick up German as a fourth language. I advised him to maybe wait till third semester to start learning German just to give himself time to get used to how university works, and also because he has a history of pressuring himself a lot when studying. Caleb was adamant on starting now, so I didn't push the issue forward. He just finished his second evaluation and he's not doing as well as he expected. He's doing, in my opinion, fine. 9 out of 10 in his first test and 8 out of 10 on his second test, but he is very upset with himself. I tried to console him and told him that if he wanted to, we could look for some private tutoring, and I also reassured him that for someone who has never spoken an ounce of German, he's doing amazing. My wife, on the other hand, is furious with him. She told him that his grades are unacceptable and to start putting in more effort on his education. Caleb got even more upset and started crying. She tried to ground him for 2 weeks with no outings, but I didn't let her do so. So now she's mad with me. She says that my weak parenting is allowing our son to be mediocre and that she didn't raise Caleb to be average. I got mad because our son is nor average nor mediocre. So I asked her how many languages does she speak. My wife answers 1. So I tell her that she really doesn't have a say on this particular issue, since out of the 3 of us, she is most likely the mediocre one in that department. She got even more furious, so now I'm sleeping on the couch until further notice. I think I really messed up here, but I got very mad with her for making our son cry, so I couldn't keep quiet. Am I the jerk for refusing to give my parents my password now that I'm an adult? This happened a few months ago, and my dad is insistent that I'm the jerk here. My parents have always been kind of overprotective. Ever since I was old enough to make my first social media accounts, they insisted that they had to have the passwords to them. Being around 11 years old at the time, I agreed. I soon got upset though, since I started noticing messages being sent that weren't typed by me on my account. If my friends swore, my parents would send them a message acting as if they were me, being rude to them and telling them that I didn't want to be friends with them anymore. This caused a lot of fights between me and my friends. Meanwhile, my parents stated that it was for the best. As I got older, this behavior just got worse. Around high school, my dad installed security cameras in the house. He said it was for keeping us safe, but honestly, it feels like I'm in prison. The cameras are all in different angles to make sure there are no blind spots. They've placed them in the kitchen, the living room, and all of the hallways. None in the bedrooms or bathrooms though. He can check them on his phone along with use them as an intercom system to get upset at me if I'm doing something he doesn't like. He made me install an app on my phone that logs where I go, for how long, and how I got there. It keeps this information for about a week and notifies him if I turn off my location sharing. He checks it often and then asks me about it almost daily. Example, I saw you went to X's house today. How was that? He also keeps a paper in the house with all my usernames and passwords for every social media account I have that they know about. They make me update it yearly and test it before letting me go to make sure that it all works. They say that it's for safety reasons, so that if I go missing or something, they can check who I was talking to. However, I'm 21 now. I live with them to save money since I'm still a full-time university student. Recently, my dad asked me to update the passwords and I told him no because I would like to have some privacy now. He got extremely upset and used his parental controls on the Wi-Fi to cut my devices from getting connected for a week. I wasn't able to do my homework properly and I couldn't call with friends or anything because I didn't have much data in my phone plan. I got upset with my dad and got into a pretty bad argument with him. He said that he was just protecting me and that as my father, it was his job to make sure that he always knew where I was and what I was doing. I tried talking to my mom about this, but she said I shouldn't keep seeing the both of them as the bad guys and that I would eventually understand. She cried during our conversation and kept telling me how much I hurt my dad by implying that I don't trust him. I've always been introverted and never go anywhere without telling them. I don't think I need to be surveilled this heavy, but I do feel bad for upsetting my mom so much. Am I the jerk? Edit. Whoa, this blew up overnight. Thank you to everyone who messaged me and gave me advice in here. To be honest, I was a little nervous posting on here because, I don't know, maybe I thought people would think I was completely in the wrong. I know it's the point here to find out, but anyways, some things to clear up. I'm 21, female. I forgot to mention that. I don't really mind people using he/him for me in here since they didn't know, but I just thought I'd say. I work part-time and I don't pay for rent, utilities, or Wi-Fi. My parents do ask me for large sums of money every once in a while to pay for stuff around the house, fixing the broken fridge, getting the heater replaced when it died, etc. I live in Canada, so the stuff in Australia and USA doesn't help me, but I appreciate it anyway. I'll try to update you guys in the future. Thank you to everyone for your advice and for wishing me good luck.
Huge shout out to our newest official channel member. Lucy is at it again. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It really means the world to us. Click this button to join as a channel member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next, the one that just popped up on the screen. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.